Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. I want to ask you a question. Are you shy? Yeah. I was really shy growing up. Not just growing up, not just elementary school, not just high school, not just college, but when I started working my first job in architecture, I was still really, really shy. And unfortunately, in Western society, being shy is not so good in Western society, and especially in architecture and engineering. But I think in Japan it's okay to be shy. I think in Asia it's okay to be shy. It's expected to be shy, maybe. A little bit. However, if you have a chance to work on an international project, it could be a project in Japan, for an international client even, I encourage you to not be shy. I encourage you to take some bold steps when you present, especially to Western audience. Maybe you will write a paper, or maybe you will get selected to speak at an overseas event in Thailand, or maybe it's in America or somewhere. I encourage you to try some of the things that you're going to hear me talk about today. So you don't have to not be shy. I just want you to participate. Let me show you. This is my friends Kaori-san and Aki-san. And they're both engineers, by the way. They both have about the same expertise in their engineering skills, about exactly the same. However, look at English fluency of Kaori-san is very good, almost perfect. But Aki-san, maybe mama desu ne? A little bit so-so. But here's where it gets really interesting. When I was working with Kaori-san and Aki-san, it was interesting because Kaori-san was too shy. She never wanted to talk, even though she could speak very good English. Too shy to participate. And Aki-san, participation is maybe too much. I like that. And so for the company and for the workshop, I felt like maybe the value of Kaori-san was diminished. It was getting smaller. But maybe Aki-san's value is very big, even though English is not perfect. Do you understand? Okay, good. So please participate. I want you to be a little bit engaged. Don't sleep. Even if you're tired after lunch, don't sleep, please. Because I think you'll find some of these ideas today really interesting. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't even be afraid in a Western presentation go, "Excuse me, I don't understand. What did you just say?" You can do that. And then ask for clarification. This is just saying, "I think I understand what you're saying, but I'm not sure. Is this what you're saying? Yes or no. I'm saying something different." So these are just guidance, some ideas. So today's topic is about presentations, but I want to stress to you that it's not really all about PowerPoint. We're going to talk about PowerPoint because a lot of your career is going to be spent working on PowerPoint presentations. I don't know how many you will make, how many you've made in university, but really what we're talking about is something I learned from this book, Resonate. Do you know this word? Kyomei suru? Do you know this word? Kyomei suru is like this. Have you ever seen this experiment? A black plate and some salt or sand, white salt or sand is put on top, and then a noise, a sound is made loud, and it vibrates the plate. And all of the salt organizes itself. It resonates with the frequency of the sound, and it organizes. Isn't that interesting? Why does it do that? It's so interesting. It organizes into very beautiful geometric patterns. And the same is true with your audience. When you're speaking to an audience, you can choose to resonate with them, or you can choose to not resonate. And I'm going to teach you how to resonate. This talk should be called How to Resonate. So we're going to learn 7 powerful lessons all based on research. These will dramatically improve your presentation skills. So what's the problem with presentations? What's wrong today in the world? What's wrong with presentations? Maybe nothing, huh? You might think. I would suggest that this is what's wrong with presentations. This is a conference I was probably at. I've been at so many conferences around the world, and so often there's a presenter reading the slides to the audience. So this might be what's wrong. And that'll be what your audience looks like, right? You've seen this in Japan a lot. In America, this is really, really funny, but it never happened in America. Even if they're really, really tired, they can't sleep in the meeting. In Japan, it's kind of allowed. But it's not a good sign. It's not a good sign that your presentation is going really well if half the audience is sleeping, right? Maybe you're not resonating. I did say this is not for PowerPoint only. A lot of the techniques I'm talking about today can be used for almost everything you do. In fact, I would suggest my job at Niken has evolved from maybe training and teaching a little bit about sustainability when I started to maybe storytelling now. I teach storytelling, and that's what we're going to work on today. So you can use these lessons today for just casual meetings in the office with your colleagues, working on a design. You can use it for impromptu speeches where somebody says, hey, can you stand up and introduce yourself? Oh my God. You can use it for, nomikai or some kind of a business dinner that you might go to, or even email. Even an email could be used and structured in a way that uses techniques from this talk. We've also used it for a lot of awards. Almost every award that we've got for MEP since I joined Niken, we work on a story first. What's the project story? I don't know if you've seen this research before. This is I put the Japanese on the y-axis. I hope that Japanese is okay. It's the percent of audience paying attention, full attention. What percent of the audience is paying full attention after a person starts a speech? In this case, it was a 40-minute speech, and so you can see right when the speech starts, right when I started talking, maybe you woke up after lunch. Well, the audience attention goes up to almost 100%. And now we're here, right? We're getting here. And say, I can't understand his English, right? Can I ask you, do you know why? Why does attention always go up at the end? Every talk you attend, your attention, the audience's attention. Every talk you do, the audience attention goes up. Why is that? Anybody want to guess? No wrong answer. They want something from your speech. They want to learn something, and they're hoping, because you've been really, really boring, right? And so now they're going, God, I hope she has something good and important to say at the end. That's why attention always goes up at the end. Of course, some people are just wanting to get out to go to the bathroom. This is why I'm going to tell you today that the beginning of your speech, how you start it, and how you end it is more important than this part. So what's the reason we give presentations? There's actually many reasons we give presentations. You know that. But some of the most important ones in this business are to inform, it's to persuade, to convince our client, to convince our colleagues, to convince your boss, to convince somebody of some idea. I want to persuade them. I want to inform them. I want to inspire. I think we don't do enough of this. I want to inspire my audience to do something. Or sometimes we just want to make people laugh, right? Or have fun. We're going to begin right here. The end. That's what I want you to do with every presentation you make from now on. I want you to think about that ending. Remember the attention curve that goes up at the end? If you start, this is lesson number 1, if you start your presentation by thinking about what do I want my audience to learn, to know, to do, to think, What do I want them to believe when I'm done speaking? So the end equals the ask. What are you asking your audience to do? Or some people call it, what's your call to action? What are you asking the audience to do? So for example, here's my ask today for this talk right now. I'm asking you to please try some of the techniques and ideas I'm presenting to you today. Please try. If you like them or you don't like them, send me an email and tell me about it. That's what I want you to do for me. That's my ask. I'm asking you. Please try. Say, James, this doesn't work for me. I don't like this technique. I'm not going to do it again. Or I love this and I'm definitely going to do it. Number 2, if you start your next presentation that your boss asks you to give by opening up PowerPoint, you have already failed. Do not start working on a new presentation in PowerPoint. This is not what this is designed for. It's not designed to write your speech. It's designed to present your speech, but not to write it. So I encourage you to use a story template. This is one, I took it from this book. It came with a CD-ROM inside the book almost 20 years ago. Cliff Atkinson, he was involved in designing PowerPoint. And so he wrote this book. And I have this template. You're going to get a copy of this. I'll share it later with the secretariats. And I also have it in Japanese. Sometimes I just start typing in Microsoft Word, but I'm using the same story template headings. I'm using kind of the same ideas. And then I'm sketching slide ideas. This is a good way. Because now, what happens if you write your speech out in words is that it's logical. It flows like a story, right? But if you start in PowerPoint, it's here and there and everywhere, and nobody knows what the hell you're talking about, and they just go to sleep. And they wake up at the end. Oh, finally, he's done. Try to start with a story template. Here's the Japanese version. And when you write your story, when you're writing out those words, and you're thinking about what you want to communicate, what you want the audience to do or think or know, don't forget about this. If you mostly use text on your slides, remember that first slide about what's wrong with presentations? All the words on the slide? If you mostly have text on your slide, 3 days after your presentation, what percentage of your presentation can your audience remember or recall? Does anybody want to guess? How much do you think people remember 3 days after your presentation if you mostly have text on your slides? Wow, you both said it. 10%. Exactly. You're exactly right. You didn't have to be right. I wished you were wrong, but you're right. It's actually 10%. That's not very good, is it? Not very good. If you present at a conference and 3 days later, only 10% of your content can be remembered by any average audience member, that's not good. So what happens if you mostly use images? It goes way up. It goes up to 65%. Imagine presenting at an international conference and your content is remembered 3 days after your presentation by 65% of your audience. That's pretty good. Would you do that every time you speak? Of course you would. Why not? Speaking versus reading. So, how many words per minute can the average person speak? Japanese and American is actually the same. The average person. It's actually the same. I'm going to tell you the answer. Speaking is about 150 words per minute. About. Again, some people speak faster than that. Some people speak slower. It's not important. So, how about reading? What do you think about reading? Is reading faster than this or slower? Yeah, it's faster for sure. Do you know how much faster? Yeah, exactly right. How come everybody knows the answer? Did you guys see my slides? Somebody looked it up. So you can read twice as fast, on average. Roughly. 250 to 300 words per minute is pretty much the range of most people. But this is why the people are sleeping, right? Because when you have a lot of words on the slide, the audience is finished reading it before you've read your slide to them. Oh my God, that's so boring. No wonder they're sleeping and their attention goes down, 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 down. Because you're reading stuff to them right off the slide. Don't do that. See, it's happening here. He's going, let me read point number 2. And he's still checking his iPhone, for messages, right? And the audience has read all of this. And by the way, research shows you cannot listen to what I'm saying and read at the same time. If you think you can do that, you can't. You're wrong. It's been tested over and over and over again with audiences around the world. You cannot read and listen at the same time. One or the other comes and goes. So don't read to audiences. So I want to talk to you about a lot of slides I see in Japan. And it's not just Japan. I see these same kind of slides in America. And there's nothing wrong with these slides. But don't present them, is what my main message is. Complicated slides that have you don't have to read this, but a lot of stuff. I just want you to read the title, Causes of Rainforest Destruction. This is what we call a slide report, or a slide deck. So a slide deck is usually a lot of data, and we're engineers, right? We have a lot of data. We're always calculating and, making research about numbers and air and structure and calculations. It's complicated. But if you're asked to give this kind of a data, a slide deck or report to a client, I recommend you synthesize it. So the text, you can read this later when I give you the handout. I'll get it to the secretariats after this talk sometime. But mainly, if you're going to present this kind of stuff, be very good at synthesizing, reducing, minimizing, summarizing the stuff. All this stuff, what if you could do it like a presentation? You could say, or show, with 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 slides like this. Remember? Visual slides. Audience is going to remember. Maybe these 3 points, 1, 2, 3, come up one by one as you say them. Oh, your audience feel impact. They're going to remember the 3 causes of deforestation. This slide will put them to sleep. You can have this slide, and it should be behind your slides in your deck. And you can hand it out to your audience even in advance. But this one, present it. Don't hand it out. So, this is the most important lesson, I think. And it's the reason today's workshop activity is about story writing. You're going to write a story as fast as you can about something you don't even know what it is right now. And don't use ChatGPT, by the way. So the power of story. Do you know that we are in this room today? We're at Nikkei in Tokyo, Japan, because of story. I don't mean you're here because of me. I mean you're here because humans told each other stories. Do you know that's how we lived? It wasn't just, finding food or water or making fire. We survived as a species on this planet because I was able to tell you, don't eat those berries, you will die. My friend, he's dead. But 2 weeks ago, he ate these berries from this bush and he died. Don't eat them. That made you survive. And guess what you did? You went and told your friends and your family. You said, hey, I just heard, don't eat those berries or those fish or something. Don't eat that puffer fish or don't go to that restaurant. Whatever. But we like to say in America that storytelling is so easy, even a caveman could do it. Here's an interesting neuroscience. You know that in the last 10 or 12 years, we've learned more about the human brain than all of human history. But today, we can measure your brain activity when you hear a story. We can actually measure it. And what happens when we hear data and facts, just information, blah, 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 number 72 and 63 and 47 and blah, blah, blah. When we hear data and facts, only the Broca and Wernicke part of our brain, this sort of frontal part and this rear part, which are really designed for language processing. They're all about processing language and comprehension. And right now, comprehension is really hard because it's in English. However, I'm going to tell you a story at the end of this talk, and your brain is going to look like this when I tell you that story. In fact, your brain activity when I tell you this story is going to be exactly the same as my brain activity when I experience the story. Things like this. You might imagine what I tell you when I tell a story. You can see it in your mind with no pictures. You might even recall something like this happened to me 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 5 years ago. I know what you're talking about. That's called referencing. You might even feel like moving when you hear somebody talking about something that involves body motion. You might even feel like moving or stretching or doing something. When the speaker starts talking about the bakery smell, and you walk by that bakery and you can smell that fresh bread baking. Can you smell it? A good story will do that. And then finally, our emotions are triggered. Have you ever read a book and cried? Or watched a movie and cried? That's because storytelling is activating your brain via these activities. It's not just language processing. It's all of these things with story. So, the number one reason, though, for story still is this one. Remembering. Remembering information. Remembering what you're hearing, or what you're learning. That's why we use story, even in Nika and Seke's work. Try to use story. Have you seen a story arc like this? Yeah, you have. You got one of these on your table, but this is a little bit different one. But, I think you've seen a story arc. Everybody knows what that is, right? We're going to cover this in more detail, but every movie, every book, everything has a beginning, right? And the beginning is a context or setting, a place. Maybe it's a place. Maybe it's a point in time. Like you're starting back 1,000 years ago, our story begins. Or once upon a time, in a land far, far away. Or think of Star Wars or something. But all stories tend to follow an arc, something like this. And I always like to point out, in fact, my story arc I drew, I always like to point out there's always bumps along the story. And what do those bumps signify? They signify something like, I thought it was going really well, but it wasn't. Or, I thought we had the right solution to the problem, the challenge, whatever we're facing, the characters are facing, there's some incident or there's some challenge or some problem. I thought we knew how to fix it when we got to here, the climax, the turning point, but we didn't know. We were wrong. And most of the times in a movie or a book, when you reach the climax of the story and you think you see the end coming, you're always surprised the ending is different. Do you know why? There's always one more bump at the end. There's always one more. Always. Here's a story. It's not a complete story, but this is any joke or cartoon like this. This is a story, right? Can you read this? I wrote this with Deep Bell yesterday. I don't know if the Japanese is right, but you can tell the father's speaking because his mouth is open, and you can tell that's probably the father and mother with the little boy. Well, yes, we could read your blog, or you could just tell us about your school day. So what do we have here? We have a story arc, at least partly. We know the context, we know the setting, we know where the story begins. It's after school, in the family home, maybe the dining room or kitchen somewhere, and they're eating. And maybe the mother or father, we don't hear this, but we think the mother or father said, so how was your day at school? And the kid probably said, just read my blog. Which didn't go over very good, right? That created some tension, some rising tension, a conflict, a problem for the little boy mainly. So what we don't know is really the turning point. We don't know what happens next. And we don't know how it ends. We don't know what the resolution is. But you can imagine it. And that's why it's funny. And imagination is what analogies and metaphors are. This project is amazing in a lot of ways. But one of the most interesting ways, I thought it was interesting because the architects and engineers, structural engineers, I want to say, probably had a few meetings just about this facade design, which was modeled after the Tokyo Metro timetable. This is an old school timetable. I know we use our iPhones. Anybody use one of these still? No. We all use our iPhone, right? But this metaphor for the Seibu Group, who owns the Seibu Line Railway, this is brilliant architecture, right? The architects are using story, analogies, and metaphors to convince them. Do you think the client said, no, we don't want a railroad iconography on our building. We don't want that. Brilliant idea for a railway line. But not only that, Kubo-san told me that this building also, one of the metaphors that the design team held in their mind was that of a tree. And I said, I don't see it. I was looking for a visual tree. I'm like, where's the tree? I don't see it. I suppose you could see a tree in these structural braces that are holding up the building, but really, it's the trunk of the tree holding the building above the rail line, spanning over the rail line, and keeping this breathable facade that can use natural ventilation. This building captures rainwater for reuse. You know, it's much like a tree, the whole living concept of a tree. Another project you maybe already learned about, it's been introduced, is YKK. Have you been introduced to that already? Yeah? I'll talk a little bit about it here. But when I first joined Nikon, this was the first day. I think Horikawa-san came up to me and said, James, I want you to go visit this building and take a tour. And then we're going to explain like all the systems and the ideas that went into the design. It was all numbers and data and facts and statistics and research and mock-ups and it was hard to understand like what the concept was, because there's a lot of information about keeping the building, the room temperature set point lower, but people felt or keeping it higher, but people felt like it was set lower because the comfort was improved. And finally, Mizuide-san said to me, James, when we were on site one day doing a tour, he said, this design for this space, the office floors, this is like, you ever sat under the shade of a tree on a hot day and you felt a light breeze pass by? Everybody has. I just use brain referencing, by the way. Everybody knows that feeling. He said, that's what this system is like. And I went, I get it. Now I know. Naruhodo, ne? I had a naruhodo moment. So, Horikawa-san gave me this presentation too. I don't know who put it together, and there's nothing wrong with it. Because it starts out showing, the big picture of the building, and we learn about its lead and its design concept and the Sudade or something, and about this slide, remember? And yeah, the problem with this slide set is it's basically facts, data, and information, and it's boring. It's boring. So I said, well, if I had to give this presentation, do you know what I would do? And they said, no. I said, well, why don't you tell a story you told to me? They told me this. They said, why did you get a new headquarters for YKK? Well, because the old building was too small. So YKK makes zippers, we all know that, right? And so I just used this picture. But imagine if I had a picture filling a slide and just said, old headquarters too small. 1950 it was built. And then 3/11 happened. Jishin, tsunami, Fukushima. And lots of our projects stopped. Nuclear power shut down. And the client took a break to think about the project, to think, what do we really want to do with this new building after this big disaster? How do we want to think? So, Yoshida-san, the chairman of YKK, he said to Niken, I want this building to be designed for a 100 to 125 year life. So that mechanical systems, maybe electrical systems, can be taken out of the building or changed over time easily. And by the way, if you don't know, the building faces due west, so sun is hard to control, right? And he's still thinking about the earthquake and tsunami. And it's overlooking a busy train station in the Ikebukuro, or in the Akihabara area. And of course, we still want it to be energy efficient and super safe. So the Sudare might be the turning point. And this idea of sitting under the shade of a tree and feeling a cool breeze pass by. Oh, 面白いね. 100-year life design requires us to think about the building's skin and facade and everything differently. And in the end, the customer is happy, and the occupants, the building users, are very happy. And creative and innovative ideas like the sweet potato farm on the roof to help cool the air handling systems and chiller units that might be on the roof. And by the way, the building got to reach LEED Platinum. Very good target, but not just LEED Platinum. It also got the ASHRAE #1 award. Wow! #1 in technology and sustainability. Wow, but that's not all. It also performs in the top 1% in the Tokyo Metropolitan Database of buildings that are in this size category. So there's several hundred or 300 or 400 buildings, and it's in the top 1%. Wow! Now that's a story, right? Has a beginning, building's too small, it goes through an arc, takes us somewhere. But James, everything I do is data, so I can't do stories like that. I challenge you. This guy, Hans Rosling, who died a few years ago, but from Sweden, he's a professor and a researcher on public health. Hans has more TED Talks than anybody. You can find him on YouTube. But this one, I put Japanese subtitles on for your benefit. Let's watch a little bit of one of his talks to show you. It's not PowerPoint. He's not using PowerPoint.
I'm going to talk about your mindset. Does your mindset correspond to my data set? If not, one or the other needs upgrading, isn't it? When I talk to my students about global issues, and I listen to them in the coffee break, they always talk about we and them. And when they come back into the lecture room, I ask them, what do you mean with we and them? Oh, it's very easy. It's the Western world and it's the developing world. We learned it in college. And what is the definition there? Well, definition, everyone knows, they say. But then, I press them like this. So one girl said very cleverly, it's very easy. Western world is a long life in a small family. And developing world is a short life in a large family. And I like that definition because it enabled me to transfer their mindset into a data set. And here we have the data set. So you can see that what we have on this axis here is size of family, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children per woman on this axis. And here length of life, life expectancy, 30, 40, 50. Exactly what the student said was their concept of the world. And really this is about the bedroom, whether the man and woman decide to have small family and take care of their kids and how long they will live. It's about the bathroom and the kitchen. If you have soap, water and food, you can live long. And the students were right, wasn't that? The world consisted here of one set of countries over here, which had large families and short life, developing world. And they had one set of countries up there, which was the Western world. They had small families and long life. And you are going to see here the amazing thing that has happened in the world during my lifetime. And then the developing countries applied soap and water, vaccination, and all the developing world start to apply family planning, and partly to USAID who help provide the technical advice and investment, and you see all the world moves over to a two-child family and a life with 60 to 70 years. But some countries remain back in this area here. And you can see we still have Afghanistan down here, we have Liberia, we have Congo. So we have countries living there. So the problem I have is that the worldview that my students have correspond to reality in the world the year their teachers were born.
I want to encourage you to look up that website, gapminder.com. It'll be in the handout. I have it on the corner of the sheet, but he uses a lot of World Health data. You can actually use it for your own research too when you're doing a project. You can pick countries and you can compare certain kinds of data around HIV or whatever your health issue you're interested in. And he's collected world information, put it out to the world for free on gapminder.net or .com, I don't remember. Anyway, briefly, how to use PowerPoint. When you do finally use PowerPoint and your story's written, you've done it out in Word, you've thought about what the audience wants at the end, you've thought all those details out, you've written it up, and now you're going to put slides together. Guess what you can do with your story from Microsoft Word? You can copy and paste it into your notes. I work with a lot of Japanese colleagues at Nikken who are presenting at a world conference on whatever, the World Architecture Conference, some ASHRAE sustainability, and we write their notes in English down here with Japanese next to it so they can see it. And when you use these notes and present, use presenter view. How many people do this? Anybody do this? Raise your hand if you've done this. Anybody done it? You've done it, yay! We got one, two people only? You should always use presenter notes, always. Here's why. The speaker has a different screen. See this part? Here it's bigger. Speaker notes. Whatever notes you type down here appear for the speaker. So the speaker's screen is actually different than the audience screen. You see that? The audience sees this one. The speaker sees this one. Use the speaker's notes. Then you don't have to put the words on the slide. And you look smart, and other people look really stupid. I'm kidding. By the way, I know the Secretariat's asked me to give my handout before this talk, and I never do it. Every year I say no. The reason I don't do it is because you can look ahead. When you give, and I know clients want it in Japan, I know your manager wants to see your presentation before you give it, and that's okay. But if you can, and it's under your control, don't give the speaker's notes out before your talk. Why? Well, you can see in this image, of course this guy's reading the slide, which again, we already learned why that's bad. And then these people are looking down at their notes. So you can, whatever you put in the speaker notes, you can print your slides out with those speaker notes next to the slide. Did you know that? So you can make a handout that has the information, so your slides could be all pictures, no words. That would be great. By the way, what I'm doing right now is one of the worst ways to deliver information, a lecture. But a lecture with pictures is a little bit better. But what you're going to do in the next session is you're going to practice by doing story writing. That's even better. Number 5, know your audience. This is just contacting whoever you're going to be speaking for at a conference, overseas or whatever. Who's in the audience, or if it's a client, you should know if it's the facility manager or who is going to be in the room when I present. Not by name always. I just mean, maybe it's 40% male and 60% female. It's 30% engineers, 40% architects, and it's whatever, some percentage facility managers, whatever. Just know your audience. Otherwise, it's like writing a love letter and just saying whoever finds this, addressing and leaving it on the train. That's about the same effectiveness if you don't know your audience. Number 6, rehearse your performance. Do you know that a 1-hour presentation, how much time do executives spend rehearsing for a 1-hour presentation? Anybody think they spend an hour? They don't. About 33% of executives spend 1 to 10 minutes, and another 29% spend only 11 to 20 minutes. This is why presentations are so bad. Nobody rehearsed. Nobody stood up with their presentation at home or in a conference room upstairs and just practiced their speech. Maybe hit record on your phone, record yourself so you can listen to it. You know what I did on the train on the way here today? I listened to my rehearsal. Anybody know what percent of communication is nonverbal? Or said another way, what percent of communication is verbal and what percent is nonverbal? Anybody know? Roughly? Who thinks verbal is most of the communication? Anybody? Who thinks nonverbal is most? Okay, you got it. You're right. 93%. 93% is nonverbal. Wow. And I can show you the breakdown is 55% is body language, body motion and smiling and these kind of things. 38% is how you sound, your voice, the sound of your voice. When I first joined Nikken, by the way, one of the gentlemen in our Osaka office, Tsuchida-san, he gave me this DVD. He mailed it to me. He said, James, I'm going to send you this Eia no Zero movie. Has anybody seen it? I got the DVD. I was so excited. I put it in my DVD drive for my MacBook, and there were no subtitles. My Japanese was even worse then than it is now. I couldn't understand anything. But I cried watching that movie. Why? Why would I cry watching a movie I can't understand? Body language. I understood with the voice when people were feeling pain and desire and love and joy and fear. I could feel it. So beware of your body language. You can read this in the handout. Open your chest. Don't fold your arms and look down at the floor or your shoes. Those kinds of things. Smile. That's your number one skill. Make eye contact. I had a really hard time with this when I was so shy. I can't make eye contact for very long. You should try to hold eye contact for 6, 7, 8 seconds if you can. Move a little bit if you can. You don't have to run around like me. You're going to get these things. I'll send you my book list. Some of these books might be in Japanese. I hope they are. This is my favorite book on the list, The Storyteller's Secret. We're not going to watch this. I was going to play a minute of this video, but I really hope you'll spend, it's 7.5 minutes long, this video. It's what we talked about in the beginning. Remember that attention curve? Why people pay attention in the beginning and then it goes up at the end? This presentation shows you in 7.5 minutes a really, really bad opening. Like, hi, my name is Horikawa-san. I work at Nikken Sekkei. I'm a mechanical engineer in the mechanical engineering department, and going to tell you about computational fluid dynamics and whatever. This is the worst way to start. Can you hear me in the back? Right, that kind of stuff. Or is my technology working? Can you see the slides? These kind of things, don't do it. Start with a story. Okay, if there's any questions, we can take them right now. But here's the 7 keys that you learned today. I hope you'll try some of them. I hope you'll tell me if they work for you or don't work for you. You'll get these in your handout, which will come in the Dropbox or the internet later. I think we have time for a couple of questions. If you want to, or comments too are welcome, not just questions. You could just say, I hated your presentation. When is this day going to end? But you still got the really fun part by working with Simon this afternoon, I think, on sketching. So this is a creative writing exercise. Now, I don't know if you did any of that. Probably not in your degreed work for engineering. Maybe you did. I don't know. But this is a group activity we're going to try. I've never done this with people working as a group. So you got this. You've got a couple of these on your table too if you need to look at a paper one or you want to scratch notes on the paper one, you can write on it. Of course, you have this digitally, I think, too, if you want it. But you don't need it digitally. But mainly what I want you to do is you're going to write a story. I'll give you the rules on the next slides. But you're going to write a story that has a beginning, and it tries to use all of these elements of a story. I'm going to give you a sample story from my experience. That'll take just a minute or 2 minutes, maybe 2 minutes. I don't know. So write a short story as quickly as possible using the story arc. You're going to be inspired by an image that you choose. You could use I pre-made an image for each table, but you can choose any image on the image slide coming up in a minute. You could choose any image you want. You could even choose more than one image if you want to, but you don't have to. And remember, the image is not the story. The story is what you write. So the image is just an inspiration for you to think of something creative. Make sure you find somebody in your group that's willing to present the story back to us at the end. We need some volunteer at each table to stand up and for 3 or 4 minutes just tell us your story, or even if it's 2 minutes, just tell us what your story is. But tell us more than what your story is. I want you to name your story, give it a name, give it a title. I always recommend you give a title after you've written the story. Same with presentations. I usually recommend you make the title at the end. Why? Because you've already designed it for the audience. You've thought about all these things. Maybe the story title should be changed. I want you to think about, at the end of your story, what is the meaning of your story? It doesn't have to have big, significant, important meaning in the world, but is there any lesson or is there any meaning? Sometimes we read a book and you go, I wonder what the reason they wrote this book or this movie. What was the purpose of this book or movie? After each presentation, other groups should try to make a comment, if you can. Or ask a question, but you can just make a comment too, like, I really like how you had a very good climax or turning point, or I really like how your story began here, or just a comment if we can from other tables. You don't have to use PowerPoint, but if you want to, you can. There's no rule against it, but you don't have to worry about pictures and slides and words on slides if you don't want to. If you just want to stand up and read us your story, that's fine. But be creative, have fun, and make it a fun activity. Don't be so serious. This is not majime. This is super fun because it's not work, right? If we get to play, it's not work. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story very quickly based on this image. I just Google searched this image or something. This happens to be a true story, but it doesn't have to be. Let's say I just made it up, but this really did happen to me, by the way. About 10 years ago, I was coming home from work and on a train, and I often like to stand at the door area of the train. I don't know if that's rude, by the way, but I stand at the door area, and standing right next to me was an older gentleman. And he was also facing out the window of the door. And the next stop was a norikai for me, changing stations, changing trains. And this old man, I could tell he was wavering a little bit, and he was holding onto the door once in a while. And I looked at him a couple times. I wondered if he was drunk or sick. Something's wrong maybe with him. And then we arrived at the next station, and the doors opened. And just as we stepped out, he fell. And I reached to grab his arms. I grabbed right under his arms. But his leg, it went down between the platform and the train. Really. And I was trying to lift him up gently, very gently. And people were shouting. I could hear, Ashi, Ashi this. I'm like, of course I know it's his leg. But before 20 seconds could go by, there were at least 2, maybe 3 station workers were helping, and I backed away. I backed away and just stood there with other people. We're all looking at him. And the station people couldn't lift him out. They couldn't. They were trying. And then, I don't know if anybody shouted something in Japanese, because I don't remember, And I probably wouldn't have understood what they said anyway. But suddenly, all the people standing there went up to the train car and they pushed on the train car against it. And the station people lifted him out. And then he sat down on a bench. Somebody stood up from a bench and they sat him down. And he looked like he's probably going to be okay. And I walked away. What happened to your brain just now? Do you know? Exactly the same chemical reaction that I had when it happened 10 years ago. So you know the background. This is what you're going to do now. Write a story. Is he okay? Is he sick? That was the action, tension. He falls. Oh no, the station staff come. But yet, remember the bump along the bottom? But they can't get him out. And then the people push on the train and the story's over. Resolution. Do you see it? Do you see the story arc? You can use this for all of your work. Okay, I'm going to call it The Train Home. I named it last night. The Train Home. That's my story. Thank you. Here's your images. I just pulled some images from my photos. So these are just from my photo feed. And yeah, pick an image. You don't have to use the one assigned to your table, but if you want to, you can. You guys decide, but don't spend much time choosing an image because it's not about the image. It's about the story arc. So take a break, stand up if you need to, stretch, use the bathroom, start working, whatever you want. At 2:30, I'm going to stop you and we're going to start presenting. I'd love to have a table volunteer at 2:30, but yeah, get going. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll do that.
Yes.